Hello everyone, you're watching Travel Massive Live. This is Maria, I'm joining you today from Sofia, Bulgaria. And today we have a very interesting webinar. We're gonna hear the story of Global Convoy. We started this webinar series last month with Lukas, who shared his cycling journey from Berlin to North Cap, which is the northernmost point of Europe. And we decided to continue this type of webinars and give a platform for adventurers to share their stories. So today we have Becca, Max, and Joel, who will share how and why they created Global Convoy, what is their mission, how you can join too, and yeah, let's hear what they have to say. And just before that, let me remind everyone, if you have any questions, you can use the chat box. You can introduce yourself, tell us where are you joining us from, so we can chat after the presentation. Okay, guys, up to you.
Awesome, cool. Well, thanks for having us, and thanks for watching the webinar. I know things are crazy right now, so really appreciate it. My name is Joelle.
I'm Becca.
And my name is Max.
And basically, we're not from similar backgrounds at all. I came from a hospitality retail background. Max?
I used to work in an office for IBM and doing personal training on the side.
And I was an art teacher before I got into the adventure travel scene.
So you can see we're quite different backgrounds going into this.
By no means officially travelers.
Yeah.
And the first time we ever met was on the 7th of August in 2016. And the very next day, we decided to try and drive fully around planet Earth in a 75-pound car. This was the beginning of everything we've done since then. So to start off, we're going to try and explain that one crazy year for you. Quite quick.
So if you're planning an overlanding trip, there's generally some things that you would want to prepare beforehand. The first thing would be getting together a crack team. Then if you're going to plan an expedition, you want to be looking at the vehicles and like rigs that you're going to take with you. Then you would generally have a financial or a budget kind of plan to take with you. And then finally looking into the route or the places you want to go to.
So this is our crack team that we put together. As you can see, you know, top notch, and yeah, that is a nappy on that man's head. We also put together a group of very fine-tuned cars that we spared no expense on. This one here being one of the ones that went around the world was the 75-pound car in question. So like I said, no expense spared. And speaking of expenses, this was our budget that we had for the trip, which we all had to break into our piggy banks to make happen.
We did actually sit down and draw a line on a map. So by definition, we did have a route. This is what we decided we would attempt to do with no real plan of how to actually execute it. And as you're about to see, didn't really go to plan. Europe as a whole did work. Some injuries, some breakdowns, no one died, so a big success. Entering into Asia, Russia and Kazakhstan went to plan. And then we were supposed to go to Turkmenistan, but
well, Turkmenistan requires visas, and we didn't realize that at the time. And of course, being at the border, you don't really have the time to get the visas, so that kind of conked that one out.
So instead, we went through Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, and we were then going to try to get into China, but...
For China, generally you need a guide to take you around whilst you're driving. We didn't have the funding in our budget for this.
And because China was knocked out, that basically knocked out all of Southeast Asia and Australia for us.
So we did the logical thing instead and went through Siberia, which, as you can imagine, is a very similar climate to Southeast Asia in terms of culture and temperature. We then threw the cars into a shipping container with a Russian guy named Yuri, sent them across the Pacific, and to catch up with them, we hitchhiked through Japan and South Korea, got the cheapest flight we could from Seoul to Vancouver to meet up with the cars. And then from there, the plan kind of came back to what we were hoping to do. Right up until we got to Costa Rica.
And then we discovered that right-hand drive had just been banished in all of Costa Rica, so there was no way we were going to be able to get through to Panama. So we had to tuck tail and go back up to a town called San Pedro Sula in Honduras, which just so happened to be the murder capital of the world at that time. And we had to figure out how to ship from there when nobody ships from there.
So one murder capital later, we're in Colombia, which was lovely, although quite hard to get there. We then went down the west coast of South America, which was great. And we were about to enter Chile, but
due to the time of year that we'd got there, it was the winter season. So pretty much all the mountain passes were closed due to heavy snowfall. So we weren't actually able to get in.
So we went around and we were heading south down to Antarctica. But
driving to Antarctica is already a ridiculous idea. And of course, we had no money at this point. So that was way out.
We instead went to Uruguay. And at this point, we were preparing to ship our cars from Brazil to Africa. But all the information we found from researching and contacting shipping companies said that it was literally a third of the price to go from Uruguay directly to Germany. So we did that and skipped out all of Africa, unfortunately. But we did get back to Europe, and after a short drive, we made it home, which was by no means easy, but we've done it.
So although the original plan didn't exactly work out, we did manage to complete a full loop of the world. And this was our final route. Within that time, we covered 4 continents, 46 countries. We had 5 sea crossings, 7 mountain ranges, 4 deserts, hundreds of hitchhikers, and this was all it within 1 year.
So you might ask, what did we learn throughout the majority of the trip? And essentially one of the first lessons we had was to stay off the beaten trail. We were wandering around in Guatemala, kind of off the normal route that most people would take, and we were really lucky to stumble upon this thermal hot spring that was also a waterfall, and we hadn't showered in a couple of days, so that was really lovely to stumble upon. We also discovered once you get outside of Europe, nothing's ever really truly broken. It can always be fixed, and everybody around there is pretty good at patching back together anything that's gone, because they don't really have anything to replace it with, so you kind of have to fix with what you have. And very last, we learned that cars are allergic to rocks, which was a big surprise to us.
Following on from car-related lessons, check whether your car is a 4-wheel drive before you start. We just kind of hope for the best. As you can tell, none of us are mechanics, and we just tried to do what we could, and it involved a lot of pushing cars out of the sand, multiple deserts around the world, a lesson we never really seemed to learn properly until it was over. Speaking of places you shouldn't go, the peaks of mountains can get very cold, which is bad for cars, but we still decided to go through that. Deserts get very hot. You might have already known this, but it took us a while to get the hang of that. And whilst our cars were ditched in the sand or freezing or boiling, you can hitchhike everywhere. And it's like the best, easiest, most fun way of getting around.
Despite what we were told, leaving the UK does not mean you will ever escape the rain. This was a place we stayed in after spending a little while in the jungle, and for us it felt like a 5-star hotel. Don't forget your tools and jacks. We forgot the jack for the Micra and ended up having to lift it a few times, but thankfully it turned out it was quite light.
Yeah, it's hard on the back.
Really good thing to learn is local languages, especially when we were hitchhiking through Japan. It really helped out to get some of the local signs up there, because not that many people read English. Another really interesting thing that we learned, kind of going on the subject of healthcare, when we were in the US, we had somebody break a finger, and that set them back about $6,000 US. Meanwhile, when we were in Guatemala, our friend Justin here, who was very unfortunate to fall out of the back of a truck, broke his arm, and set him back about $30.
So don't ever get hurt in America under any circumstances.
Probably our most important lesson that we learned out of the entire trip was to follow local advice. We were pointed to a very nice dirt parking lot as to a place that we could camp for the evening, where the locals said, you know, it's a safe place. You're right next to a church. You know, nobody's going to mess with you there. And we woke up the next morning to this scene, which was a pretty great surprise.
Just a local church, no biggie. Speaking of, speaking with locals, we just found out that if you treat border guards, the police, the military as if they're your best friends, they have a pretty tough job anyway. So to get some like random dirty tourists come through and be kind to them normally makes their day, and as a result, they can make your day. This was a military outpost on the way into Ecuador, and frankly, it made getting into Ecuador a lot easier once they liked us. So that was a tip we took forward for all the borders. And speaking of going between countries, pack your car and clean your car before you put it in the shipping container. This is the Nissan Micra that came around the world with us. And in our rush, no one actually cleaned it. And there was a dirty pot. I think it had some old soup in it or something.
Something like that, yeah.
And that was just the perfect place for some mold to spread over the entire vehicle. So in Vancouver, we opened up to this mess. As you can see, it was not pretty.
So overall, we experienced really bad days, but also really good days. And the thing that we got most from this was having the community. It was having the people around us that helped us get through these ups and downs.
And one of the things we didn't actually realize what we had on our hands was what good we could do with that community. We were really lucky to stumble upon a place called Balzac Falah, which is in Belize. It's a girls' orphanage that they were building. And they usually tend to get about 2 people a month or so that'll volunteer and go down there and help them build. We were lucky enough to be able to bring 16 people and build a root cellar for them, which made us feel all kinds of fuzzy. Lucky enough for us, though, that wasn't the only projects that we were able to do.
The murder capital that Joel mentioned earlier, this is it, San Pedro Sula in Honduras. And as you can tell from this horrifying photo, it's death and danger at every turn. As we were passing through, having built an orphanage, we just started offering our help. You know, what can we do? Hi, we're passing through, but there's lots of us. And we ended up volunteering at the school for a while, just having a bit of a cultural exchange, helping out in the classroom, teaching English, anything we could really to help. And it left a good impression on the kids from what we could tell, and they left a fantastic impression on us. So we didn't stop there by any means.
Pretty much everywhere that we went and we've traveled through, we tried to kind of help in any way we could, exchange language, culture, as well as learn from others. And one thing we came to realize over time was not only we were having like an impact on the people that we were meeting in these areas, but we were also having an impact on the people that were with us.
Yeah, so this is our crack team, as you saw at the beginning. Whilst they were strangers and, you know, acquaintances at first, after not very long at all, they were our family. And it was us, this family of crazy, awesome people, and the entire world. And our favorite example of this is Lukas, who you can see at the back in the white vest. As you can see him better in his Facebook profile picture, which he loves. He's incredibly vain. He was one of the first hitchhikers we picked up, and it was on day 1 in France. And he said, "Oh man, I like what you guys are doing. Can I join you for a week, you know, down to Italy?" We said, "Week? Perfect, you know." After week 1, he said, "Guys, this is great. Like, can I stay for another week?" We're more than happy to have people. And at the end of week 2, he says, "Man, guys, I think I might join for a 3rd week." You can see a pattern. And after 7 months in Guatemala, he just said, "Guys, I've had the best time of my life, but my mum is pissed. She doesn't know where I am, and I've missed far too much university, so I need to head home now." But he was just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the influence people were having on each other. And it was so great that when we did return, finishing our loop, we could then visit Lukas and visit his family and see the influence we'd all had on each other's lives.
And in a nutshell, that was our first round the world trip. Well, our round the world trip that we all met on and started with. And when we got back, we were really lucky in the sense that quite a few people were interested in that story and wanted to meet with us and kind of work with us on future projects.
So following the response and attention that we got, we kind of felt that we needed and wanted to do something else, like continue what we were doing. We weren't really sure if we could recreate the same scenarios and situations, but we decided that we wanted to make another trip. So we chose the month of May, as this was a good amount of time from when we got back from our round the world trip to kind of recover and prepare. So yeah, we chose May because it's kind of off season. So generally things are a bit cheaper, which keeps in line with our budget ideas. And also being kind of not summer and not winter, you have a mix of weathers.
Yeah, and this kind of chaos of not arriving places when they weren't fully open, but they would still take you. And sometimes it's sunny, all of a sudden it's snowing wherever you are in Europe. That kind of created this chaos or mayhem, which became our name we gave it because it was in the month of May and it was just mayhem. In the year of 2018, gave birth to the, Mayhem 18. And whilst we thought this might just be a one-off, we decided to give it our best, and we did what we did before. We just reached out to strangers on Facebook. So this is a post we put up in some groups, trying to make it as bad an idea as possible to only really attract the true crazy people. And that seemed to work. And before we knew it, we had a horde of people and vehicles ready for something crazy. And all we had left was to make a route. And
so logistically wise, we really wanted to bring, like Max was saying, all of the ambiance and all the spirit of the round the world trip into something that was way more possible for kind of your average person. So obviously not everybody can take a year off on their job, or even a month, or even like 2 weeks. So we wanted to build something that was accessible to everyone. And we chose a couple of major cities along the way with major airports so that people could fly in and fly out. If they only had a week, or if they could only do 2 weeks, at least they would be able to join along for a chunk of the trip. And that gave us a big openness to take people to, places like Turkey and Georgia, Bulgaria, Romania. Moldova was another big one that not a lot of people, from like France, Germany, and the UK usually tend to get to experience. And it ended up being a really great success for us.
So following this, we then decided to run it again the next year, so in 2019. And this year we wanted to focus on being based around one place. So as you can imagine, our trips are very intense, and we don't really get to experience like the full of places. It's almost like a whistle-stop tour. So we chose Albania as our hub. We chose to stay there for 3 weeks so we could run smaller trips from there and kind of really experience the culture and understand the kind of the area.
It was whilst we were in Albania that we hatched the idea for our next project. And whilst we just put this out to the world to see if people were still interested in coming on trips with us, before we'd even got back to the UK and finished this one, we had several people sign up and confirm that they wanted to come on what was going to be our biggest trip yet.
And most recent trip. So this was our K to K, which was 100 days long. As you can see with the last two, we were trying to make shorter ones. I think we just kind of missed the length and gruelingness of being on the road.
Just
not
the
sure.
Punishment.
Yeah. But as you can see with this, again, we wanted to make it accessible to everybody. So we broke it up into about 3 different parts. Of course, it was up to the individual how long they could come along. And kind of jump in, jump out for the different locations. One of the key places we really wanted to get back to, because it was had such a impact on us from the first time we went around, was the stands: Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. And it was really great to be able to get back there and kind of that desertous terrain, high mountain terrain. It's really phenomenal. But one of the biggest advantages that we had on this trip, coming from the other two, was the fact that we were able to network and build such good connections with friends being in hostels along the way, which we kept on while camping, but this time we definitely had a much better accommodation along the way down because of all the connections and networking that we had before and the community that we had kind of built. So this was our most recent success.
And as a kind of connection of all the trips, we have come to realize that it's all about the community for us. And our goal as a company is to continue growing this, including people from all over the world, all ages, and just kind of connecting people to have exchanges and to support each other in moving forward.
And essentially that's kind of where we are as the convoy. We do a lot of videos and other little bits and bobs on YouTube. We actually, when we got back from the end of the trip, we ended up sitting down and putting together a small documentary. It took us about 4 months and digging through about 28,000 files.
Took a while.
Which took a little while and a lot of learning curves because we'd never attempted to put something together like this before. But we recently had it released out on Amazon Prime this year. So if you're interested in a bit more about that story, you're welcome to go there. I think it's also on Vimeo.
It's on Vimeo in certain countries. I believe Japan seems to really like it.
Yeah, there you go. So, but yeah, you can find it on Amazon if you'd be interested in watching.
And if you're at all inspired by any of this to join us on a future trip, or if you even just want to follow us along, we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever your social media of choice is. Just find us on there and say hi, because we love chatting. And as of recent, we suddenly have a lot of time on our hands because we can't necessarily go anywhere.
So we do have 2 upcoming trips this year, but due to recent circumstances, they are postponed. But if you keep up to date with us online, then we can let you know when they're going to happen, because as soon as we're allowed to leave, they will be happening. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. That was very interesting. We already have a few questions in the chat, so you can also go ahead and I can read them for you. So, okay, Rick is asking, maybe he missed this. Do you provide the cars, or how does that happen?
Oh, well, it's kind of, we usually will tend to provide like 2 cars at least. We try to encourage other people to bring their own and kind of start their own teams almost. We like to talk to everybody and kind of keep everything on, but yeah, essentially we really like it so that everybody's very independent, I guess, is the best way. Like
it's kind of having the vehicles form a hub for people to do their independent stuff. So for example, we were driving past Greece, and it wasn't really worth the effort to get there, but a small handful of people really wanted to visit. So they were like, well, can we all take 1 car? And it's very hard to do that if it's your like darling car. So what we end up doing is either getting people to bring their own old cars that they were going to get rid of anyway, or we help supply or connect people that want to sell a car with people that want to buy a car. So that's roughly, there's no hard and fast rules, but that seems to be the trend, is people's old cars, or we find ones and save them from the scrapyard.
Yeah, I think because in the UK, cars are pretty cheap.
So cheap.
I think partially,
secondhand, that is.
Yeah, secondhand.
No.
I think partially because we're right-hand drive, so there isn't so much of an aftermarket. So we find that we can get cars for a few £100 or less. So generally what we'll do is we'll try and get a car between us, and then as more and more people get interested, we can recommend them to cars that we would buy, or we get groups to pitch in and kind of work it out depending on numbers. So every seat is filled, but we have as many cars as we can bring.
So like the last car that we bought, for example, was an Opel Safira, and that was 400 pounds, I think, something like that. And that's one of the ones that we use to KDK, and that's in Kyrgyzstan right now as we speak. So yeah.
Cool. So we have 2 of the same question. How many hitchhikers did you pick up, and what basically has been the largest global convoy that you've had so far?
Oh, well, yeah, we like picking up hitchhikers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's hard to measure, because some, like Lukas, that was supposed to be a week and it became 7 months. Some literally joined us for a day. In Croatia, I remember we picked up a lot of hitchhikers in one day that literally wanted to join for a couple hours just to get to the next town, whereas some people do join for ages. Overall, in the hundreds at least.
Yeah,
like
we definitely, I think we definitely don't get that many people who like hitchhikers who stick on for really long periods of time. I think mostly because there's not enough time for them to like reset their plans usually for
they're normally
kind of
going somewhere.
They're normally going somewhere, and they kind of have their own plans and stuff like that. So they don't kind of become part of the team, if you will. So but like, I don't know, a lot of people will kind of see us while we're driving on our way, and then usually kind of contact us through Facebook or whatever, and then try and kind of sign up because they see we're kind of like on their route for something that they want to do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the norm, I feel like, more than anything else.
Yeah.
What's the biggest group that you've had at the same time, at one point? Like
25 or 30 maybe?
I think
probably about 30 on
the round the world trip.
Yeah.
In Europe, we had quite a few people. We had a girl from Germany who wanted to bring her own car and just join for a small section. So at that point, I think we had 5-6 cars.
We had 6 at most.
Yeah.
And then one was a van that was just full of these crazy Lithuanians who would just pick up every single person they saw. And so it was like every day we'd like camp, and there'd be new people there. And it was such a brilliant time of chaos, but it was chaos.
Yeah.
So about 30 or so, I think.
I think the sweet spot for us was about 20 or so. I think that was like the best numbers that we could kind of ask for.
Yeah.
30 is a bit much.
Okay, let's go through the other questions. We have a few more in the chat. So how far apart was the convoy at any given time? Like, did you all stick together, or like you've had some points where you've been like super far away and couldn't get in touch or something?
Mine is we had
There's a couple different times we've had to split, like shortly.
Normally for like a car braking, because they're so old, they're very easy to fix, and you can just find a local mechanic, but they can't fix it overnight. So we had one of the axles go on a car that was being driven by a team of Belgians in Nevada.
Yeah.
It
was right outside of Vegas. That's what it was.
But we had to get into Mexico to get to a certain place because of the date, because Christmas was coming up and we were going to do some work there in return for accommodation. So we all went into Mexico, save for 3 people in a car, but they did join up the game. And I'm trying to think if we ever got further apart than that, because that was quite a distance temporarily, but it was only a few days apart.
Oh, what about on Mayhem 18 with Jaren?
Much bigger.
So we had someone, so for Mayhem 18 we had 4 cars?
At that point it was 6 actually, because we had the van.
So we had 6 cars, and before we leave on trips we put together like information packs based on our experience, and someone misread the thing they needed to bring for the car, so they didn't actually bring proof of ownership. They managed to get as far as Bosnia.
Bosnian border.
The Bosnian border turned them away. So they had it's to put in a nutshell. They went back into Croatia. They flew someone back to the UK to get the paperwork. They flew then to Budapest for them to pick them up, and then they drove, and they still managed to beat us to Greece.
Yeah,
I think.
When we got to the beach, they arrived 30 minutes later, even though they'd been there for a day, basically. And if you know the European geography off the top of your head, Bosnia is like right in the center of this huge ring they had to drive around, and they had a fast car and a good driver, and they did it in like a day. Lots and lots of caffeine, from what we're told. That was probably the longest and the biggest.
Probably the biggest distance, but they closed that pretty quick.
Okay, next question. What is the oldest person who went on your trip and the youngest?
Oh, Albania. Okay, so I guess oldest. We picked up a hitchhiker in Belize who is in his like 70s, but that was for a very brief period, so it doesn't really count. But recently,
on our Mayhem 19, we had a Estonian woman who's 53. Yeah, 53. Who came along and did the entirety, did the whole trip. She was
hardcore.
Yeah, she was really awesome. And she didn't even speak English. Her English was quite rough at the beginning. It was obviously much better at the end because we all usually tend to speak English on the trips. But yeah, she was really awesome. We bring her back anytime. But yeah, we don't have any kind of like age group really. We do tend to stick in between like 20s to 30s ish. But there's definitely
it's a lot more
limit.
like your mental, not your mental age, but if you are.
Yeah, definitely mental age.
She was 53, but she acted like a 30 or 40-year-old. Like, she was young at heart, and that meant that when we went to do crazy stuff, she was right there with us. And one of the trips that's currently postponed, we have a 65-year-old planning to bring his motorbike.
Oh yeah.
So he will become the oldest person we've
had.
He's
a cool guy.
And it's not a case of are you in the right age range? It's are you mentally willing to kind of hang out with people who aren't like you? And if you can, you're gonna have a great time.
Cool. What happens to the cars at the end of the trip?
So the 2 cars that you see in the picture right now, those are still, we still have the Skoda, and then the Micra is still a daily driver down in Devon. We usually either sell the cars which are still for use at the end. I don't think we've actually
scrapped them.
Had this. I think we've scrapped.
We scrapped one. We for the Mayhem 18 trip, we got a car for like £300, and it was absolutely fantastic. But by the end, every piece of electronic on it failed at one point. So you couldn't tell how fast you were going, or how much fuel was left, or how hot the engine was, or your speed. And it was just kind of not worth trying to fix. And so that one got scrapped. But every other one either goes to a new home or is waiting on the next adventure. Our 2 cars we took to Kyrgyzstan are right now in Kyrgyzstan waiting for us to fly out with a new squad and come back. So yeah, we're actually pretty good at recycling them now, I think about it.
We'll try to be anyways, to our best of our ability.
We have a few more questions. You guys are very popular.
Thank you for the questions, guys.
So basically, we have a few questions that fall into the same category. Can you guys explain a little bit more about how do you monetize your brand? And also in terms of partnerships, in terms of partnerships, like what do you guys do to approach partners, and what is the best way to, you know, market to them and reach out to them?
Well, to be honest, it's evolved a lot over time. I think because we kind of started this off without the idea of it being any kind of money-making enterprise. And I'll be honest, we're not a great business model still at this point yet, because we don't make a terribly large amount of income. But yeah, when we first started out, it was literally just kind of asking anybody and everybody. Max got us a really great partnership with Maplin right before they went under, which, you know, you can take that where that goes. But yeah, they ended up giving us the drone, and
2 in the end.
2 in the end, yeah.
It was kind of a case of, we're going to go do something crazy. We're doing it regardless, and we're going to film it and everything. Would you like to have your name associated with it? And if we have any drone shots, we could say, oh, that was Maplin, thank you for that. And they were on board. And then we just started figuring what would make the trip better. So obviously we went for the most important things like coffee and beer. And so we started reaching out to local breweries and local coffee companies, basically saying, when you end up on some abandoned Montenegrin beach, you want to have like a nice party, you could be the provider for that party. And they were into it. So we had like a few hundred cans of beer just given to us for free, so we could have these parties sponsored by, you know, 4 Pure Brewery. And then we did the same with other brands and products that would genuinely be useful.
A lot of the brands as well that we approach generally have like some sort of like eco-friendly relation, or they're local businesses. We work with a company called Wide Eye, which is a Brighton-based like beauty products, but they're all natural and eco-friendly. So like we can wash in rivers and we're not harming animals and the environment. So we try and look at like businesses that share the same interests of like travel, but also like sustainable and responsible travel.
And I think going back to kind of the business side of it, kind of the exchange, because of course we do lots of photography and videography and stuff like that. So we'll exchange things like that for them. But we don't usually tend to get monetized sponsorship. It usually tends to be some kind of trade of like product and things like that, which helps us out because that allows us to pass that on to our team members. And kind of the same with like hostels and friends that you know have different kinds of accommodations like on the ways for our trips. What we usually do is we'll exchange and in exchange for a cheaper price and or free accommodation, things like reviews and or like work or photos or other things like that.
I think a really simple way to sum it all up is, so for the K2K, it was £50 a week, which is, to be honest, insanely cheap. We weren't there to become millionaires from it, but within that £50, we would then find a hostel of a friend and say, hey, we can bring 20 people and just like overrun you for a night, and everyone will be in the bar and it will be great for you. So they give us a discount. So the £50 from guests gets them a discount. So they win that. The hostel gets loads of guests for that night and some reviews. So they win that. And then we get to connect these people and save everyone money and provide a better service. And so far, that has been working.
Yeah. And like I said, it's a slow build. If you're someone who's looking at getting into that and like trying to kind of, trying to start approaching different potential sponsors for a trip you might be planning or something like that, you kind of just have to start small. I wouldn't expect any kind of monetization right off the bat, because especially after whatever this is that's happening finishes, you know, people are going to be struggling. But if you ask to exchange things, you know, that usually tends to be a good starter. That's kind of how we got our start, and we've made the connections that we have
and
today.
if you want to exchange with us, shoot us an email. We love doing that.
I slide that one in there. Yeah.
I definitely know.
But yeah, no, we're always open to exchanging, you know, kind of thoughts, ideas, and or doing little partnerships and you know, whatnot. So yeah.
Yes, why not? I was going to ask that question at the end, like how the Travel Massive community can help you, how can businesses, people get involved. So we will share that information on the recording and the blog recap after that. And the last two questions, I think, are there any brands that inspire you?
Well, what we mentioned, I guess, like, well, there's the brands that we work with, obviously, which For Pure Brewery out of London is an amazing, they're an adventure brand brewery, and they're really fantastic. They've sponsored the last three trips that we've done. We have Trading Post Coffee, which is out of Brighton in the UK. And they've worked with us for the last 3 trips as well, and they've all, you know, been really fantastic.
We've got Gone West as a Scottish-based company, which they plant trees to offset carbon emissions. And by driving with full vehicles, we're already beating out trains, planes, other public transport in terms of minimizing our environmental impact. But Gone West just take it that extra step further. So our trip all the way to Kyrgyzstan, they covered us and they planted trees to offset all the carbon emissions of that and then some. So any brand that is about adventuring, seeing the world, making it a better place, and doing as little damage as possible, we're more than happy to work with them. You know, no one's perfect, but we'll try and do our best.
And you know, Travel Massive, because you know, you guys are awesome, and we love being able to hang out. We've had Becca is one of the chapter leader for Bright, and we had a couple of events out there that have been fantastic. So, you know, people like Travel Massive that are great connectors for or communications connections.
Yeah, good ways for
there
people
you go. Good
to
word as
connect
well.
and kind of network and build their community.
Yeah, I think places like Travel Massive are extremely important to us because, you know, we're all about community and meeting with people who are, you know, different in mind, different in thought, and want to do the same things.
Yep, we like supporting adventures and businesses like yours. Okay, I think we can wrap this up with the last question. Fast forward 12 months from now, travel is open for business again. Can you tell us where can we see you? Where are you going? And what's the plan?
12 months from now, we, assuming everything goes to plan, we should have just returned from Kyrgyzstan and run our Mayhem 20 trip. That's been indefinitely postponed. We have a rather big project that we can't talk about that we've been effectively hired for because of our logistics and ground support skills that we've built up over all these trips. So we should be just about to leave to somewhere that we can't say. I know that's really teasing, but
actually what we will be doing for sure is we're going to be doing a crowdfunding event to try and build a big trip, which I also can't talk about too much, but that is where we'll be. So if you would be interested, this is another, it's kind of like the Round the World venture where we're trying to get everybody involved, and we genuinely want everybody that's interested to come with us and to be a big part of it. So if you are interested, please like us on Facebook and Instagram and stuff, and just follow our feeds, and you'll be able to hear about it when we're able to announce it, which is not now.
We'll be soon.
very
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I think that was very, very interesting. We'll have the recording. We will have a blog recap after this, so we can share any links that you mentioned, any brands that you mentioned, and how can basically the Travel Massive community can get in touch with you. This is it from us. I will be in touch, and the Travel Massive is really, we like to support you in any way we can. And I'm pretty sure that you're gonna pass by Sofia on your next trip. So, you know, message me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. And to everybody out there, thank you for watching. And stay safe and be good to one another. And these are super weird times. Hopefully we'll see you on our next trip.
Indeed. See you guys.
Thank
All right,
you.
bye.
Cheers, bye.